I now call Keith Brown to be followed by Martin Whitfield. In 6 minutes, Mr Brown.
Thank you, President Officer. I think we've just seen, in words more eloquent than any that I can summon from Stephen Kerr, the basis of the Conservative attack on the Scottish Parliament. He states that the power in this place comes not from the people of Scotland, but from the Conservative Party. He also states that he has the zeal of the convert, and yet he is trying as fast as he can to run away from this Parliament at the first opportunity. People can draw their own conclusions from that. President Officer, my members' debate in May on a similar topic to this one, I stated that our Parliament was under attack by the UK Government, and 5 months later, the UK is again deliberately stripping our Scottish Parliament of its hard-fought-for and hard-won powers. In 1997, around 75% of Scots voted for the creation of this Parliament. I campaigned, along with Labour and Lib Dem colleagues who have been very silent in recent months, for the establishment of this Parliament, not just for its establishment, but for it to have tax-raising powers, bitterly opposed by the Conservatives at that time. But I think many of us can be guilty of forgetting a time before this Parliament existed. It is important to remember that the Parliament was not created by accident. It came into being with the support of 3/4 of the population of our country in order to respond to the real and pressing need for Scottish self-government. And the strength of support that delivered that result had built up over decades of Westminster misgovernment in Scotland, not least the mismanagement of, for example, oil and gas. You remember the Labour Party concealing from the people of Scotland through the Macron report the real value of the oil and gas which was in the North Sea at that time. Remember the industrial disputes of the 1970s and 80s, as I mentioned last week, and consistent Westminster governments rejected by Scottish voters, but nevertheless governing Scotland being just a few of the reasons why that emphatic result was delivered in 1997. And I am certain that, given the motion that is up for debate today, many of us speaking on this issue will focus on the technical or the legislative aspects that have led to the power grab on our Parliament. So I would like to shift focus for a second onto the real difference that this Parliament has made to the everyday lives of people in Scotland since it was established, and therefore prove why the powers of this institution absolutely must be protected. The progress made under devolution is far too broad to do justice in 6 minutes. But lower income tax for most Scots, just to remind people that more people in Scotland pay less tax, a bigger proportion of them, than do in the rest of the UK. The lowest average council tax of any UK nation, the expansion of free early learning and childcare to 1,140 hours, the scrapping of tuition fees and prescription charges, free personal care for everyone who needs it, the Scottish Child Payment, which incidentally supports 7,295 children in Clackmannanshire and Stirling Council's areas alone, alongside many other benefits from Social Security Scotland. And these are just some of the measures various Scottish governments have implemented since 1999 that make the lives of ordinary Scots better, none of which featured in the speech, of course, from Willie Rennie. And every day we can contrast and compare the situation in the rest of the UK and see clearly the marked difference made by this Parliament for everyday Scots, and research backs this up. According to the Joseph Rowntree Foundation, Scotland has a lower poverty rate at 18% compared to England's 22% and Wales' 24%. And I think that alone proves the difference that governing our own affairs can make. And indeed, this week alone, and it's only Tuesday, we've seen the news that the price of water in England and Wales is to increase by £156 a year in order to line the pockets of private shareholders, while this Parliament has consistently kept Scottish water in public hands. And compare the fankle over HS2 taking place at the Conservative Party conference at the moment. Hearing Donald Cameron talk about the SNP being in disarray when you look at what's happening in Manchester today really is ironic. The Scottish Government's action, though taken in contrast to the fiasco of HS2 to scrap peak time rail fares, and you'll clearly see the difference that Parliament can make to ordinary Scots. And given what I've just said, if we pause for a moment and imagine the harm that would be perpetrated in our country in the absence of a Scottish Parliament, or even if the small degree of self-government our country enjoys was to be reduced further. And that's exactly what's happening now and has happened since the UK's vote to leave the EU against Scotland's wishes. The tagline of the Brexit campaign was "Take back control," but we did not realise they meant take back control of Scotland. And if you want an example of that, the decision to hold back money from Scotland and from Wales and then represent it as a gift subsequently from the Tory government is exactly an example of the way they are taking back control. The damage that the UK's Internal Market Act, and we've heard before ad nauseum from Tories, the two governments must cooperate. Where was the cooperation when Rishi Sunak announced the changes to net zero? The complete reversal of some of the policies, the impact it has on Scotland was huge. Not a word beforehand. That's where there's a lack of cooperation just now. The damage that the market is doing, the Internal Market Act is doing, both to democracy in Scotland and in Wales, can't be overstated. And under the Act, UK ministers have the power to undermine and override what limited powers our national parliaments have, in some cases unilaterally and without consent. And the big problem for the Tories is, every year, for as many years as I've been here, they uncritically accept whatever attacks there are on devolution, whatever cuts there are to our budget, whatever latest injustice is done to the interests of the people of Scotland, they will support it every single time, because that's where they take their orders from. The reality is that there's always been, and there still are, many caveats in the Scotland Act that allow the UK government to flex its muscles in Scotland's democracy, such as, of course, the Section 35 order. And while I appreciate there are a wide range of views on gender reform in this Parliament, we must surely all stand up for the ability of our national Parliament to make decisions, ones indeed enjoying cross-party support in this place, and to implement them, even when it has made decisions that we, as individual MSPs, may not agree with. One of the most shocking things throughout this power grab has been the complicity, I have to say, of the Labour Party, the self-proclaimed party of devolution. As we've heard already, the Labour-run Welsh Government has consistently stood up for devolution. Mark Drakeford's done it in a way they've never heard from the Labour benches over here, even from some of the people that used to be at the forefront, as I was in 1983, for a campaign for a Scottish Assembly, now very silent on the attacks that come from Westminster.